Humans are wired for social connection. It's key to our survival.
You look lonely.
You and I are in the loneliest generation.
This week, I discovered a terrible Earth disease called loneliness.
Americans are lonelier than ever.
But I'm so lonely.
And it can't get any lonelier than this.
No one prepares you for the loneliness that you feel in your 20s.
It's like you feel like nobody has you.
To feel lonely.
Loneliness.
Lonely.
Talking about loneliness.
People are talking a lot about our loneliness epidemic, and all the stats and studies about how this affects our health are troubling, but hear me out. I don't think we're talking enough about isolation. I'm not referring to hermits, hikikomori, or mental health struggles, but unwilling isolation. The physical separation of humans from each other. It's easy to blame technology or culture or kids these days, but I think it goes deeper than that. So I wanted to figure this out, and like you, I began on YouTube. All right, so a few things have become pretty clear. Sociologists and psychologists widely agree that humans are social creatures, or at the very least, we naturally form tribes. And it seems like the common diagnosis nowadays for loneliness as it relates to young people is that we are addicted to our phones. Kids don't go outside these days, our dopamine receptors are whack. We get it. But what if it's not just our social media addictions that are making us lonely? What if this trend of staying inside on our phones and online is the result of a larger, more pervasive and sneaky separation of humans from our communities? I had to get offline for a bit, so I picked up some books suggested by friends and coworkers, and Sierra started some research on her own as well. Full transparency, our MO at Strong Towns is placemaking and design patterns, so my focus here is definitely influenced by this. In his book Bowling Alone, Robert Putnam points to the modern erosion of one of our most important social metrics, social capital. This is essentially all the networks that make collaboration among individuals more effective. Putnam suggests that this decline, beginning after its peak in the 1950s, might be due to these reasons: demographic changes, work and economic pressures, technology and media, generational change, and suburbanization. We don't have much to say about the first four of these, but we can speak on the last one. Putnam suggests that the move to suburban areas often isolates individuals and makes community engagement more challenging. With an ever-increasing handbook full of laws that restrict how we build our cities, we stop working together to create our places. Our eroding trust in each other led us to prioritize private and family life over the village, and we designed subdivisions that physically bar ourselves off from each other. So why did we do this, and what do we do about it? We need to start with some context. Things weren't always this way. Putnam refers to Alexis de Tocqueville's observations when describing the early United States social foundation. He says that it was the Americans' propensity for civic association that most impressed Tocqueville as the key to their unprecedented ability to make democracy work. Our ability to create associations with each other wasn't dependent on using meetup.com. Our cities used to have amenities interconnected throughout them, so that instead of having to drive to Walmart, people were able to walk to a corner store in their neighborhood. Many could easily stroll downtown or to public hangout spots where they'd have chance encounters. There were places that kids just knew they could walk to, like parks, ice cream shops, or even just meeting up in the street to play games. In his 1999 book, The Great Good Place, Ray Oldenburg suggests that these chance encounters, where we could build social capital, often happen in what he calls third places. These are places beyond home, work, and school where you can spend time relaxing, connecting, and feeling a sense of belonging. They have a low bar to entry to get into. In other words, it's a free or low-cost place, nothing more expensive than getting a coffee. These aren't a new phenomenon. They can be found in the Greek agora, the Roman bathhouse, the Chinese tea house, or the French salon. I know in Chicago, a good example of this would be the lakefront, where at any point on a nice late spring and summer day, I can find tons of people hanging out, playing spike ball, having picnics, tanning, and just enjoying each other's company. And I often run into friends from high school or from college who ended up landing in Chicago. This is my favorite Chicago amenity. It belongs to everyone, and we pride ourselves in it. In other places I've lived, and for most new developments in the United States, parks are oriented around children and dogs, and I have neither, so it's kind of weird for me to hang out in those places. While coffee shops and bars exist, sometimes I don't want to spend money to exist comfortably with other people. I came across this video called Why Our Third Places Are Vanishing by Rachel Leonardo. Her channel is criminally underrated. You should check it out. We've worked together before, And I knew that she was a person who I could talk to about good social infrastructure and what it actually looks like. So we took Ray Oldenburg's 8 categories of what makes a good third place and boiled them down to 3 simpler ones. I'll skip to our recap. 1, it's a community living room. 2, it's accessible and inclusive. And 3, it's like a place to play and chat. Do you feel like where you're at in Pamplona, that is a thing that exists?
100%. There's like no doubt in my mind that I think that we could find a couple places that best represent that idea.
This video by Flurf Design called Why Kids Don't Go Outside Anymore was really eye-opening. He does a great job of putting words to the problem, and he had me thinking about my own childhood. As a kid growing up in what we would call like a pre-World War II streetcar suburb, I couldn't relate. I had plenty of third places, including a plethora of parks. After middle school, hordes of us would hang out, play sports, socialize, climb trees, and just be kids. If friends were hanging out on a summer day with no plans, we would often just ride our bikes to downtown Elmhurst, where we'd surely run into friends and acquaintances without fear of being kicked out for loitering. In this way, I sometimes find myself relating to older generations describing their childhood more than younger ones who grew up in modern, what we call suburban experiment suburbs. Take this from Tom, a Strong Towns member who wrote a story for us about his hometown of Erie, Pennsylvania.
It was the height of the baby boom. You couldn't turn around without bumping into a kid your age, though. So it was a lot of very free-floating society of kids. I mean, I remember one summer when we just played baseball in this one backyard every day. It was like having a job. And actually, I'm thinking you were talking about third places or like places that were kind of hangouts. And I immediately thought of Buddy Russell's. Buddy Russell was an old retired jazz musician who had like a snack bar, corner store kind of place. The free range aspect of my life continued in high school. I mean, I had a bus pass and I took a city bus home.
The similarities between Tom's and my childhood remind me that it's not just about having a third place to go to. It's about the ability for anyone to get there and belong there. Nowadays, instead of kids going outside on their own to explore and have fun, we have kids stuck waiting for their parents to drive them to Target so they can be monitored as they get Starbucks and walk around. This is like whiplash from the latchkey generation. But I know I'm sounding a little bit like a curmudgeon, so let's talk to someone who's actually part of Gen Z and grew up in the environment that I'm talking about. I saw this video called Why You Need a Third Place by Amanda from the channel Amanda Mariana, and I knew that she would have a great perspective.
So I think it was just like my childhood was very marked by a lack of autonomy, which I don't know if I always necessarily felt that in the moment. It was frustrating at times though, because I also grew up in a household where only my mom drove. My dad doesn't drive because he has like a visual impairment. It was just like more of a struggle to like get around, even like getting someone to like bring me to practice or like pick me up from things and stuff. It was just like hard because my mom couldn't always do it. So there was I honestly had a lot of anxiety of being like, oh geez, how am I gonna get here? I have to ask someone for a ride, and I didn't want to like, feel like a burden to people. This
sucks. And this is one of the unintended consequences of us adopting car-centric infrastructure, or places that are designed with using the car as the primary means of getting places. When a car equals autonomy, not having one means being a burden. And while Amanda has since moved to a place where it's easy to get around without a car, and she loves the new social sphere she's in, I'm sure that plenty of you watching this may be thinking, well, I have a car and I have a social life, so what's the deal? We aren't talking about car ownership. I own a car. Cars don't make us lonely. Needing one to have a social life is a real problem. Amanda also touched on how Starbucks, a brand that's built its reputation around being a third place, has moved away from the cozy and comfortable hangout into a sterile and efficient model. They put out a memo in 2022 where they claim that third places include cars and phones. There's no guarantee that your favorite third place chain will still be an option for you even if you can drive to it. Car-centric infrastructure allows for corporations with more efficient supply chains to beat local coffee shops and corner bakeries that used to be in every neighborhood.
Sometimes I do feel like my childhood and coming of age, like sometimes I'm like, oh, I feel like it's missing a certain texture to it because so many things was on my phone. And that's why honestly I became a YouTuber, so I really can't say I like regret, any of it, because I was just like always so online. I've had my YouTube channel since like 2012, but I don't know, I think my life would have like a really different texture in a time where that didn't exist.
I really like the phrasing there. What does that texture look and feel like? Well, luckily, Rachel got back to me with some footage, so let's check it out.
Hey Mike, I'm on my way to the Taconera right now, which is one of the two spaces that I wanted to define as a good third place here in Pamplona. I think this place does a really good job of being a community living room, like you had mentioned. There is a space for everybody to be at, whether you're just coming to try and sit on a bench, or over here, I think this is what really makes it a third place, is offering structures that can provide food and different atmosphere from just the natural aspects. I also think it's quite accessible. I don't know if you can see behind me here, but there's a bus stop where 4 different lines come through, and we're literally feet away from accessing this park and also other aspects of the city for people to enjoy. Here in Spain, the terrace life is really big, where people will come and they'll drink a beer and they'll sit on the terrace for hours just to speak with one another. It's a really, really nice way of life. And I think this is a more man-made example of those 3 characteristics that you defined. What I think is really exciting about this is not all of them have to be the same. We can take these frameworks and apply them in different ways and with different strategies to create spaces that best reflect what the people in those towns and cities need. They don't have to look like Pamplona's Plaza de Castillo with bars around the perimeter all over the place, but they can have an American touch that makes it feel like people are proud to be in those spaces as well.
Rachel brings up a really good point, and that's that our third places should reflect the places they exist within. And this got me thinking. I know someone who's an expert in human geography and architecture, and she also happens to be a mom who grew up in the United States and is now raising her kids in Germany. I talked to Ashton Schottler of the channel Type Ashton to understand some of the cultural differences she noticed reflected in German places versus American places.
In Europe, but in specifically Germany, because that's where I live, I tend to see a lot fewer kids-only spaces or adult-only spaces. So, for example, in the United States, you'll have playgrounds, which are very much kid-only spaces. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you'll see things like a beer garden, which is very much an adult-only space. But in Germany, you'll often find those two things right next to each other. There is this real intention in Germany to build spaces that everyone can enjoy, whether that's the spectrum of age or the spectrum of ability. And one of the things that I love advocating for as part of universal design is that we don't just simply think about the life cycle of a building in terms of its physical sense, right? Like how long will this building be useful? But rather, how can a building adapt as people age? And I think that's something that was really missed by a lot of the car-centric designs that we've put in place. If you are an adult and able-bodied person with a car, the United States can be a really great place to be. But if you don't have that access anymore, it can be quite limiting. And a consequence of that design is now we've also lost a lot of the social infrastructure for a community to really be there to check up on one another.
When Amanda mentioned that missing texture of her childhood, it reminded me that we can't just plop a generic third place in a town and expect it to function in the same way that a co-created public square can. Many videos and articles concerning third places focus on why we need them and how you can get one or build one, rather than making incremental adjustments to accommodate spaces people desire to use already.
I'll give you 2 examples of this. There's an area along the lakefront that had become an unofficial dog park. The city saw that there was demand for this after a petition was sent, and the Lakeview Dog Park referendum ended up passing with 80% support on the ballot. I'm not sure what's taking so long though. An example of this that's kind of a bummer is the shutdown of Friday Morning Swim Club. This began as people hopping into the lake at Montrose Harbor and turned into a massive event with thousands of people socializing, grabbing coffee, and jumping into the lake before work. Chicago doesn't officially permit swimming in the lake before 11 a.m., and Montrose Harbor isn't technically a designated swim area. But instead of finding ways to accommodate this clear demand, which was made clear by Chicago's official tourism arm, the city brought out police and intimidated people gathering. While there are different opinions on the legality and safety of organizing an event like this, the Park District chose to demand that the organizers pay hundreds of thousands in permits and requirements or shut down, instead of finding ways to make it work for everyone. The city's reasoning, valid or not, reveals a backwards mindset about how cities interact with their citizens.
This desire for control and planning is eerily similar to that of a well-meaning but overbearing parent. In her book, It's Complicated: The Social Lives of Networked Teens, Dana Boyd observed that teenagers would much rather get together in person with friends, while parents were under the impression that the classroom, after-school activities, and prearranged playdates were how teens wanted to socialize. Teens were more interested in informal gatherings with broader groups of peers, free from adult surveillance.
We've, in a lot of ways, taken away the autonomy for them to be able to go into these social places alone and visit with their friends and chat, again, without being chaperoned. So instead, they've built these communities online to be able to fulfill this primal need I think they have to be these social creatures, to have this human interaction.
This isn't just about kids, though. While their plight is important, we should see that their forced social migration online is a warning to everyone. In his book Palaces for the People, Eric Kleinenberg writes, "If we fail to build physical places where people can enjoy each other's company, regardless of age, class, race, or ethnicity, we will all be similarly confined." Good social infrastructure isn't exclusive to Germany or Spain, and it doesn't have to take the form of a large corporate monstrosity like Kidzania either. I think of a place in Milwaukee called South Shore Terrace Kitchen and Beer Garden, which is located within South Shore Park. You have a beach, you have Lake Michigan, you have the German-American heritage of Milwaukee reflected in the fact that it's a beer garden. You have a playground, and it's accessible to the neighborhood that it's surrounded by. It also doesn't cost a family of four $100 to visit. This is awesome, and we need more of it. No, we should not copy and paste it, but we should allow places like this to develop everywhere. When people want their neighborhoods to improve, or they want amenities like I mentioned, it's such a lazy and tired response to tell people to just move. I'm sure people who are cool with leaving friends, family, and jobs would love to, but even so, the streetcar suburbs and neighborhoods have already been discovered, and there aren't enough of them to go around. Our desire to control neighborhoods is what got us here in the first place. The demand for traditionally developed suburbs that foster community and allow people to be less car dependent, like Somerville, Massachusetts, Media, Pennsylvania, and Elmhurst, Illinois, is insane. If you can't afford to move, or you're locked into a really great interest rate, it's on you to advocate for your town to get back to better development patterns. This sounds really easy in theory to support, but are you open to loosening up zoning laws to allow for more diverse infill development in your neighborhoods? What about introducing a new pilot project that would allow for backyard cottages, allowing for more people to live in and contribute to your neighborhood, and more kids playing in the park? And if you're afraid of an outside developer taking advantage of your precious town, then are you going to do it yourself? Are you going to support the local developer who has a stake in your town? Or the local small business who doesn't want to and can't afford to demolish a storefront downtown because of parking minimums? Because if not, you shouldn't be surprised when a beloved local cafe is replaced by a Subway, or your library is defunded, or you don't see your kids anymore, or your assisted living facility is so far from grandkids that you're stuck watching Office reruns on your Meta Quest 8 because you can't afford to downsize nearby. And if you're nodding along to this, angry at someone else for not letting you have the life you want, you don't get a pass either. Have you joined a casual running club or kickball league in your town? Have you started a meetup group based on your niche interests? Have you showed up to your local coffee shop enough to be recognized by the barista? Or made an effort to learn the name of the front desk guy at your gym? Have you joined a local conversation or advocacy group and spoken to your city council person? Strong towns don't happen overnight. We are all co-creators in the places we live, and our actions matter. As much as I may be a regular on some of your YouTube feeds, I also know that I've been dragging my own feet when it comes to becoming a regular in my Strong Towns local conversations. So I'm going to go ahead and get to our happy hour, but I'll catch you next time. Peace.